Hi, this is Street Life and I'm Natasha, back at it with a recap and discussion of Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Home Alone 2, Lost in New York is the 1992 sequel to the 1990 classic, Home Alone. Through a series of events, Kevin McAllister is once again separated from his family, but this time finds himself in New York City at Christmas time. The wet bandits, Marv and Harry, have escaped from prison and happen to arrive in the Big Apple around the same time as Kevin, and they cross paths. The movie follows a formula that is similar to the first film, but being set in New York and bringing a collection of characters into play as hotel staff adds a new energy to the film that helps it avoid many of the drawbacks found in sequels. Usually when you have very successful movies, Hollywood, where possible, attempts to make a sequel. A lot of times, or more often than not, I would say, if the first movie is really good, the second one, if you're lucky, is decent. But quite often, there tends to be a decline in quality. More often than not, they would have been better just like leaving the idea where they found it. But every now and then you have some films where they make a sequel, and I would say, for myself personally, like with Black Panther, for example, sometimes the sequel can actually be better than the first, or I enjoy it more than the first. But then you have some films where the sequel is as good as the first, right? And I think that's the case here with Home Alone, where it's one of those movies where the first and the second are actually quite good. The ones after that, as far as I'm concerned, don't exist. I refuse to acknowledge them. Sure, they've made other variations and whatnot, but I pay them absolutely no mind. Home Alone 2, I think, is actually really good. As a kid who grew up in New York, most certainly not in Manhattan, I'm from Brooklyn, but having attended high school in Manhattan and also college as well as working there after college, just spending a lot of time in New York, even like during elementary school, junior high and whatnot, going on school trips to Manhattan, going to see Santa in Manhattan. I understand the energy of Manhattan. Spending weekends there, especially once like I was a teenager and in college and things like that, hanging out in Manhattan, there's an energy there that you don't find in many other places. So seeing this movie for me, granted, I was really young when it came out, when both of them came out. I wasn't hanging out in Manhattan at that time, certainly not by myself. But by that point, I'd been to Manhattan. I'd spent time in Manhattan. And it's like even now when I go back to New York, I typically carve out some time to spend in Manhattan, right? Most of my family still lives in Brooklyn and Queens, but I'll make a trip to Manhattan and spend some kind of time, whether in like Manhattan, or up in Harlem or something like that. I'm going to take advantage to at least pass through and kind of just get a little bit of that New York energy. So watching this movie, it made me really nostalgic about growing up in Manhattan, the feeling of New York around Christmas, where even as a kid in Brooklyn, you had that vibe, right? So the movie starts off back in Chicago at the McAllister home, along the lines of how it did the first time, right? Where Kevin has his big family, his uncle and aunts and cousins and whatnot are once again at the house. This time they're on their way to a family trip to Florida. Kevin believes, as I do, that there should be no beaches or palm trees at Christmas time. That's not Christmas. Christmas, New Year's, it's supposed to be cold, preferably with snow. This is one of the things I don't like about Atlanta. It should not be, 60 something degrees in December. It's like, you should be wearing a heavy coat and a sweater. This should be your attire, not like a t-shirt. It's one of the things that I miss about New York, where I actually prefer cold weather, especially around Christmas. It's one of the things I look forward to. And so I'm with Kevin on that. I'm not going to Florida. I'm not going to the Caribbean. I'm not going anywhere warm. I'm not with sunshine and rainbows for Christmas. It should be cold. I want snow. I want to wear a coat. I need a sweater. So anyway, I was with Kevin. And we're back to this thing of the bickering between him and his older brother, the conflict between them and whatnot. I think the brother gives him a hard time, and Kevin, rightfully so, gives it back to him, which results in drama, much as there was the first time around. And so it follows like the similar outline, where the circumstances are slightly different, but Kevin ends up separated from his family. The first time around, it was that he wanted his family to disappear, right? He didn't want to have anything to do with them. He got his wish then, and he kind of gets his wish now, which is that he wants to have his own Christmas, like go on his own vacation. And so instead of having to go on this vacation, not, holiday to Miami with his family, they give him problems and stress him out. And so he prefers to do his own thing. He gets separated from them at the airport, and he winds up in New York while they end up in Miami. Surprise, surprise. The family isn't as far away as Paris, which is what occurred last time. But there's this thing again of trying to find out where he is. In this situation, though, Kevin is a little bit older than he was in the first movie. I think he's supposed to be like a year older, but really it's like 2 years have passed in our time. So, he's grown a bit from the previous experience, being on his own at home and whatnot, dealing with these burglars, having a bit of confidence, gaining a bit of independence. He's not scared as he was the first time around. And so when he realizes he's on his own, he relishes the idea of being in New York, right? He's excited about it. This is a smart kid. He's able to quickly figure out, how to get a place to stay. He checks into a hotel, and not just any hotel. He checks into the Plaza, which is, I've never stayed there, right? But I am familiar with the hotel, having, worked in the area and attended college nearby. Just walking around in that area, it's right across the street from Central Park. It's a very grand hotel. It has like quite a storied history. It's like one of those hotels where people go to get married. There's expensive cars parked outside. There's like, doormen and whatnot. And so I chuckled to myself because watching the movie, it's like, of all the hotels you check into, this is the one that you pick as a little kid. And so, quite a bit of a hilarity ensues here, much as when he was back home alone, right? Here's this little boy staying at this big grand hotel, everything at his beck and call. As to be expected, he's eating like this huge ice cream sundae. He's ordering up room service. He's just having a ball. I would go on such a vacation, And as with Kevin, I would prefer for someone else to pay for it. Kevin spends a lot of time by himself, but because here he's in a hotel, there's like staff. And as a result, it's like, here's this little boy that's checking into this hotel. They take notice of it. And then you end up having these interactions between him and the hotel staff. He's out and about in the city. He goes to a toy store. He meets a lady in the park. In this case, because he's less isolated versus when he was left at home, the story in part is about him being out and about in New York City, right? A little boy out and about in New York City around Christmas time. So with that, you see various landmarks. It was pretty nostalgic, actually, to see the Twin Towers, him up on the observation deck and whatnot, him taking a cab ride over the bridge from the airport to the hotel, to see him at the hotel interacting with the staff, going to a toy store where he has like a really sweet interaction with the store owner. It feels like in the first movie, he was completely on his own and had very limited interaction with other characters. Here, because he's in New York City, he has more interactions with other people, and it actually leads to some pretty comedic moments. I think it played a factor in helping to differentiate this movie from the first one, where certainly they carry over some of the little things from the first movie. So like, for example, where he was using like the VCR playback to pretend it was like a grown man and things like that, right? With the Bandits and the pizza guy and whatnot. Here you have product placement where to some degree the VCR is replaced by a talk boy. It's replaced by a talk boy, which was like this little like recording device that you could record and slow things down and whatnot. And so he uses that to his benefit. It helps him out in situations where, once again, he needs like an adult voice. For the first part of the film, a lot of the interactions are with him and the hotel staff, right? Him trying to prevent them from knowing that he's there by himself. And so we kind of have a return to the film where he bumps into the wet bandits. Now at this time, they're going by the sticky bandits. And so that carries over from the first film where they're looking to get revenge on him. They're in town. They've escaped from prison. They're once again trying to make a score, sort of along the lines of what they did last time. But instead of targeting homes, they're targeting a particular toy store. And so with that, you have that storyline playing in the background. But you then have this interaction once again between them and Kevin, kind of like this slapstick comedy thing where they have a few little moments when they bump into each other in the city. But then in addition to that, you have like this return to the like mousetrap type setup with like the booby traps and whatnot from the first movie, where, that adds some comedy. But what makes this film work is that they've kept some of those elements that worked in the first film, but they changed things just enough to make it feel fresh, right? To make it feel equally enjoyable. I like Lost in New York because I love New York at Christmas. So that was a major addition for me. I don't think there's any way this movie would have worked if they'd kept it in Chicago. I could be wrong, but I think the reason this works as a sequel is because while they kept some elements from the first movie, changing the setting, changing the environment, instead of him being at home by himself or even in Chicago, where I don't think it would necessarily have the same energy, right? Here in New York, it's a bustling city that provides an opportunity for him to come into contact with a lot more people with like different environments and situations, which makes the movie feel similar but fresh and different at the same time. I think that the first one probably felt really fresh, right, when it came out. It's certainly a classic, but I also enjoy the second. The story is similar, but I really just enjoy seeing New York at Christmas time. In the first, it certainly takes place around Christmas, and that comes into play, but for lack of a better term, the Christmas spirit in the second is really strong for me, right? It's nostalgic for me. I watch it and it's like it kind of makes me homesick, but cures my homesickness at the same time. And so it reminds me of being a kid growing up in New York and how amazing Christmas time was. And so with that, it's just something that I love about the film. The setting really does it for me. And with that, I highly recommend the film. Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my movie review playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.